Hey guys, Bart from TST Industries here. Welcome to TST Garage. As you can see, we have a 22 plus GROM over here. We'll be installing the TST Industries axle sliders on the front and rear of this bike. When you order these, they do arrive to you in a set of 2. If you need front and rear, you'll need 2 of these sets. They do not vary from front to rear, so no worries there. They're also the same ones that we provide for the previous generation GROMs and also the Z125. So installation's essentially the same, torque specs are the same. There are a few nuances that are just a little bit different, things that we need to consider. So we'll walk you through that and also the steps of the installation. So you can see this is a 2-piece setup for each side of each axle. We have a delrin slider that is consumable. In case you do go down, this thing will take the brunt of the impact, wear away, and hopefully leave the rest of the stuff behind. Hopefully it'll leave the cut behind. Typically they do. We've seen a lot of crashes. We've had a lot of crashes with this setup, and all that needs to be changed is the delrin cap after the crash. We do provide these delrin components as a repair set. In case you do go down, you are able to pick these up from us on their own, and that way you don't have to buy a whole set. We've had tremendous success with these parts actually on the previous GROMs, and I think you guys will enjoy them too. They do end up saving you a bunch of money by not letting some other components that are more vital get scratched up. They do keep the bike off the ground a little bit in a low side. If you crash at top speed and you start tumbling and stuff, all bets are off, but these things actually do help a lot. In addition, I know that some of the owners of the smaller kart tracks that these things race at, they do require that you have some kind of non-abrasive crash protection all around the bike, and these are approved by many of the race bodies out there that sanction all the races, so that's a big plus. You can see here next to me we have the 3 different versions of the aluminum base slider. We have black, red, and silver. In addition, we now offer a stainless, a high polished stainless version. Works exactly the same, but it also works on the Honda Monkey. It does have a slightly smaller diameter here to fit the Monkey, and it's made of a harder material. So if that's your flavor, cool. If not, these things have been around for years and they do a really good job. Anyway, I've spun off on yapping here. Main point of this video is to show you how to install these. We're gonna start on the rear of the bike. It is slightly more complicated, but really no worries. We're gonna get through this and then jump to the front. Let's get started. In the first step, we will suspend the bike up off the ground. As you can see here, we already have it suspended on standard fork lift. This only works if you have some kind of a spool setup on the bike. Here you see our TST Industries captive chain adjuster with a spool boss and spool. And that's how we were able to use this lift. You can also use a standard padded lift to go under your swing arm here. Either way, once the bike is up, I like to put something under the wheel so that when I take the axle out, it doesn't just drop out. That is the preferred method. You can actually take the wheel off. It's just a little bit more cumbersome on the way back in. All right, now that the bike is ready for disassembly, I'm gonna grab a 14mm socket for the axle head and a 19mm for the nut, and then we'll remove the axle. All right, now the axle's out. As you can see, stock setup has these washers that also have an L-bend that go under here, and this is because the OEM setup for chain adjustment that goes within there has only one set of spacing features for inside your swing arm. So this goes on the outside and helps to prevent overloading the sheet metal stamping here from forces due to suspension hitting really big bumps. Now, with our setup, as you can see, there's no need for that outer spacer or outer washer. We have full contact with the top and bottom of the swing arm in really broad areas. So this thing is unnecessary. Furthermore, the axle length is such that if you were to use 2 of these, one on each side, then your nut, your locking nut, comes over and locks, but it only shows maybe like 1 or 2 threads, and then you're relying only on the torque that you're applying to the nut for the locking. Still all in good as long as you torque this appropriately. So we'll require 44 foot-pounds of torque, and then it should be good to go with the locking element still on the threads. But since we have this nice shiny setup in place, we're going to forego the use of these washers because we have a really broad area on our bosses for the sliders to make contact against here. So that washer is really truly unnecessary. And so let's go ahead and install these now. Obviously, we want to put the axle head inside the cup, feed it through, lift up on the wheel until we get proper concentric placement, and then we just wiggle around until that axle goes through. All right, I have that through. I'm going to place this cup in the same fashion on the other side. And a quick note here, since these captive chain adjusters stay in place no matter what, your wheelbase and chain tension will remain the same as before we started operating on this bike. In this video, if you have these guys, I recommend loosening them up, pushing the wheel forward, then going through the whole chain tightening procedure, because what I found in the past on the previous generation bikes is that that's required to keep the proper chain tension after this kind of an assembly. I'm going to get the nut on the other side of the bike. Once I get the thread started, I can use an electric tool to advance it down closer to the bottom, but I do not use mechanical tools or power tools to tighten any of this, because I like to use a torque wrench. I'll set my torque wrench to 44 foot-pounds, and with a 19mm socket, I'm going to turn this to bottom out while holding the other side, the axle head, with a 14mm. Once I reach 44 foot-pounds, that should be good to go. And now it's just a matter of turning in our delrin slider pucks, one on each side, obviously. And we're going to grab a 15mm socket and tighten these guys down. Now what I do for these is 10 foot-pounds, and that always keeps them in really nicely. And that's pretty much it for the rear. Quick note, obviously, as you know, I described this, there is a spacer and washer setup here that goes on the outside of the swing arm with the OEM set of adjusters. I know a lot of you will keep this OEM set of adjusters, and that's fine. I just want to make sure that your installation is safe. So for the purpose of proper locking on the lock nut on the axle, we want to make sure that you have enough threads showing through that nut, and also that you apply proper torque. Please, I can't stress it enough, use the appropriate amount of torque. And then if you notice that with the use of these washers, spacers, you don't have any threads protruding past the locking mechanism of the nut, you can remove these guys. They are not absolutely necessary, as shown by the previous generation of the GROMs. I've seen a lot of these on race circuits without the use of any spacers. The OEM setup of the previous generation GROMs doesn't even include these. There are washers included, but not a spacer mechanism. So don't think that they're absolutely necessary, and it's much more important to have your axle stay on. If you feel uneasy about making this decision, speak to your mechanic, speak to a tech at a local dealership, help you make that choice. All right, anyway, enough yapping here. Let's jump to the front. All right, here in the front, I've suspended the bike already. I have a headstand here on a pin. This is not a typical setup for people. This does make it very easy to work on any angle that we may pick. This is also my easiest way of suspending the bike, so that's what I picked. I think the best paddock stand for this particular bike is the one that goes into the holes with pins from the bottom, because it leaves all of this area unobstructed, but I actually don't have one of those. So this is how we're gonna do it. Again, I have my set of blocks here underneath, so this doesn't go too far down with the wheel after I remove it. 14 millimeter and a 19 millimeter will be our friends at play here again. All right, now that the axle nut is loose, I'm just gonna push it out. This one's really, really simple. And that's pretty much it. Get my axle through the cup, get it back in there. Essentially the same thing on the other side. I'll get my cup out on the axle, get my nut in there and start the threads. Once I start the threads and I know they are engaged properly, I'm going to advance using my impact close to bottom out, and then I'm going to switch over to my torque wrench. We are again going for somewhere around 40 foot-pounds. The front of this bike actually requires 40 exactly, so I'm gonna go to 40. Once I reach that torque, that's it. I'm gonna switch over to my other torque wrench that is preset for 10 foot-pounds and get my delrin caps in. All right, that's pretty much it. Now the bike is well protected. We have axle sliders on all the contact points around the wheels. We have our frame sliders, bar ends. We're good to go. I'm gonna disassemble this, lower this whole get up, and go take it for a ride. If you guys like what we do here, check out tstindustries.com, give us a subscribe, hit that notification bell, and we'd like to hear from you. Give us a comment. I like to read them, I like to reply to them. Hopefully we could converse. All right, you guys, that's it for me. Thank you for watching. See you later, ride safe.